Hello, Reformed Mythologist Nate Morgan-Locke here with episode 4 of Behold the Comments. I am joined, as ever, by Eleanor of Lothlorien. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Tired.
Okay. Well, we've got a lot to get through, so let's dive straight in with comments from The Remarkable Life of Evelyn Reaction. So the first one that we've chosen for this was from someone called Normine69, who said, "Thank you for the review. Appreciated it both as a movie nerd and as a starlight, close brackets." So then I remembered that that's the name of one of the people in the documentary. And so I said, "Wait, Normine, aren't you the guy from the documentary who gave a eulogy at Matt's funeral?" And then someone else said, "That's him, all right." And then he said, "That would be me, yes." Very cool response. So that was really nice. And lots of people seemed to enjoy that video, largely because it was a great documentary. Then, more controversially, we have Domitabs, who said, "I don't think death is the problem in the world. Death is just part of our journey. Beautiful doc, I recommend." Well, I think that's where we disagree.
Yeah.
I think death is a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an imposter on the good creation.
You do get a lot of people saying death makes life worth living.
Why do they say that?
I guess if there's an end to something, it makes you appreciate it more.
Are they trying to say something like, when you've got unlimited amounts of stuff, then it's not very special? Whereas if you've got something that's rare and limited, like limited edition, like a super rare Magic the Gathering card, such as the One Ring to Rule Them All, which was apparently bought by Post Malone. You know about Post Malone, don't you?
Small amounts, yes.
Because he did Fortnite with Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
But apparently he plays Magic the Gathering and bought this single card, which is worth millions of dollars. So perhaps that's what they're trying to get at with this argument that death is what makes life special. I think when you look at the biblical account of creation and the biblical explanation for what human beings are, made in the image of God, that therefore being made in the image of God makes you precious and special. And so it's a bit like saying, if you've got this precious and special thing which then got destroyed, that would somehow make it more precious and special. You think, well, no, it doesn't, actually.
Because when you have something precious and special, you want to look after it.
Precisely.
Keep it.
Yeah.
Because
it's precious. It is my precious. Precious! I think the issue that death is somehow acceptable and good and proper in a deep sense, I think that's where Christianity is just like, nah, the Christian view of creation, of things being made according to their kinds, of man being made in the image of God, and of God saying that death is then introduced because of the fall through Adam, but then that life can go through death because that's what the second Adam, Jesus, does. The grave has no victory. Death has lost its sting. Now, in that sense, then, in a Christian understanding, you would say death is then part of the journey for the Christian.
Yeah. Because
Jesus is the resurrection and the life. So the way that death is transformed by the Christian gospel. Free Nomeo said, "I've consumed a bit of your content and I like it a lot. It is worth a sub and a like. I am a Christian trying to work out what place media has in my life as a husband and soon to be father. May the Lord bless your work, sir." That's good to know. People are enjoying it, and also thinking about media not just as a personally consumed thing, but also as a relational thing. So this guy is defining himself in this sense, first as a Christian, then as a husband, and then soon to be a father. All right, I want to put this one in from our last Behold the Comments, episode 3, at PCPSSP3XR- 270 said, "Quite like this channel. Well, I quite like you, PCPSSPX3R, whatever that is."
That's a face.
Is that supposed to be a face?
It's like
Oh, it's like one of those kind of... All right, okay, it's supposed to be a face. Oh, on the issue of D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, Congatron2983 said, "I'm thinking about making a homebrew Christian D&D game where the world itself is like a Christian allegory story like Narnia. Hoping to use it to get discussion going on theology and morality, but it might backfire if the players decide to go off the rails." Well, I think the players deciding to go off the rails would make it a deeply Christian idea. So maybe just start it out in a garden, make a tree off limits and see what happens. A long comment from Sky or Richeg. Speaking of theology in D&D modules, I ran a campaign a couple of years ago that mashed together 2 modules in a very theological, fun way. The 2 modules were What Child Is This by Nate Trem and Anjang, the Queen on Dog Mountain by Zidek Siu. What Child Is This has the player's party escorting the recently born godchild as a baby to a temple across the desert to keep him safe. There are clear Judeo-Christian overtones in the module, with the godchild being more flawed, paganized stand-in for Jesus, and draws upon ideas from Christ's birth narrative in the Gospels, flight from Herod, massacre of innocents, etc. Also sounds a bit like The Mandalorian, which I don't think I'd really thought of as that kind of...
There's also, what's that game called? There was a game where a man had to protect
a baby.
Well, the baby was kind of not born yet.
It was a pregnant woman.
No, it wasn't. Death Stranding.
Oh.
Porters from the company Bridges transport bridge babies in pods that mimic a womb.
Oh. Okay. Well, nonetheless, this comment suggested that it was a wonderful time and lots of good stuff for the players to interact with. And a few people commented under that to ask if they could get some more information about it. Shall we take a look at comments from The Power of Storytelling with Christian fantasy author Benjamin George?
You should.
At Strange Theology, I am a youth pastor and I've been trying to resolve one of the biggest problems in youth ministry. Students do not connect with the way the church presents the gospel, but they, as we all do, have an insatiable appetite for good stories. This is how God has revealed himself to us, but we've departed from the art of storytelling. I've covered the topic on my own podcast, but I know I am only scratching the surface, aren't we all? I will be taking a class from Martin Shaw soon. Really glad I found this channel. Thanks. Fabulous. Yeah, no, that all sounds very exciting. Particularly think about young people and relating to the gospel. Just read the Heliand to them all. That's what you should do. Strange Theology. That'll change them. Jonathan Hagger 791 said of Benjamin George, he's correct on granola being the best cereal.
I think he's wrong.
Well, it's 2-1 at the moment. What am I going to vote? What is the best cereal? I don't even know.
No one's going to agree with me on the best cereal.
Oh.
My favourite cereal is Frosted Shreddies.
Frosted Shreddies. Wow, that is an odd choice. And that's, you've gone very particular there with the brand name, whereas I remembered Benjamin George in his lectures on cereal. He was saying that granola is a type of cereal rather than a particular brand of granola. And let's come to comments under why this Dragon Age cutscene is so painful. And this one actually made me laugh out loud. Someone called out the Scarlet 9620 NPC dude with an NPC analysis. Non-playable character dude with a non-playable character analysis. Well, that's what we're aiming for. Because without the non-playable characters, it's just an empty world, isn't it? So I'm glad that I can be an NPC living in your world.
You do have catchphrases like an NPC. You do
This
say
is
the
true.
same things over and over again.
Yeah, quite repetitive.
Do you ever get stuck against walls?
I have been stuck against a wall before. I think I probably got the emotional range of an NPC as well. But then someone else replied with a sort of hand gesture and then a mirror, presumably suggesting that this person should look in the mirror because they were the NPC dude with an NPC analysis. In fact, I might do that as a t-shirt. That'd be quite cool. Reformed Mythologist, NPC dude. And I want to embrace everyone with this. NPC dudes. Let's all be NPCs. We're not the hero. That's the whole Reformed argument, is Jesus is the hero. Come on, NPCs, join me.
But you use dudes, and dudes isn't gender neutral.
Can't say dudes and dudettes. That one doesn't work. On the issue of apologies and penance. At AMC9329, I was recently given some insight on this type of performative apology. Is referring to pulling a barv, which is doing 10 push-ups when you mess up as an act of penance. This sort of behaviour is pretty common in online communities where the membership is infiltrated by right-wing trolls looking to drive wedges in an otherwise peaceful community. This neo-Puritan penance, let's come back to that, is one way to tell if someone is truly a member and not an enemy. For anyone not from this sort of terminally online social communities, this scene feels ham-fisted at best. I mean, that seems plausible, that you might have terminally online people who are trying to weed out the right-wing trolls looking to drive wedges. It seems a bit weird, though. And then this Neo-Puritan penance. I think you might want to go and read back over your Puritan paperbacks to find out whether the Puritans were into these constant acts of penance. Arguably, they weren't. This was a very well-liked comment by our good friend at Scotty Brewer. One of the most curious phenomena I've witnessed in the last decade is the reversal of who is doing the cringe preaching and who is making the competent art. But perhaps it's not so curious when you know who is in charge of the whole story. Excellent point. Let's keep striving not to do cringe preaching in our video games and novels and things as Christians. Let's respect the art form. Let's have a doctrine of creation. Let's make things that are good in and of themselves and let the gospel come out through that. A.Z. Larson, for Nate, BioWare used to make amazing games with deep stories and lore and used to be my favourite game company. Talk about throwing everything away. From what I've heard, I don't follow them closely, all of the original BioWare developers have moved on. I did hear that there was quite a lot of staff turnover during the development of Dragon Age, The Veil God. The company is now just a shell, but the DA series had some seriously awesome world building. World building.
World building. World building.
World building.
World building.
World building.
World building.
World building to include the main human religion, which had some very Christian themes like sacrificing one's life for others. I'm definitely boycotting this game, though. As you like to say, media consumption is definitely optional. That's my NPC catchphrase. There is a comment here. Isn't Christianity all about sacrifice? Didn't you guys basically get Jesus to do all your push-ups on your behalf? If you think that asking for push-ups is in order to forgive sins, just wait until you read 2 Old Testament. They demanded blood sacrifices then. There's a whole chat under that comment. The best part being, it would be good to look up, study, and research things before making blanket statements. If you would like to know more about Christianity, by the way, if you sort of think, I've got a bit of a shallow read on this whole Christian faith thing, we do actually produce at Speak Life, that's the ministry that Eleanor and I work for, we produce a course called 321. So if you go to 321course.com, you can do a very short course, video-based course, which introduces you to Christianity. So it's basically, what does life look like from Jesus's perspective? So what does Jesus say about who God is? What does Jesus say about the world? What does Jesus say about you? And I would recommend that Waldo.8021 might like to go and do that. Here's my favorite comment. So don't worry, this is as much Dragon Age as a chicken is a T-Rex. So I read that comment. I was like, that is brilliant. And then I looked at who left the comment. At Samurai Chicken. This person got chickens on the brain. One final comment that was left under a slightly older video, which is called The Deep Symbolism of Wall-E. This was at Drew Cheech, who said, dude, I love this movie, and I never looked at it that way until just now. If you'd like to look at Wall-E that way, go and look at that video. I think that's done for the comments.
That's all the comments. All of them. Every single one. No, just kidding. There are so many still coming in for Twilight of the Gods.
I know. That is just never ending. What have we got coming up next, Eleanor?
We have a clip from an interview you did with Tyler Van Holteren of Lithos Kids.
I love Tyler Van Holteren.
You really did love
I think he's amazing. He's just such a great guy. So here's that clip now.
I was reading the new book, Mansoul Chronicles, to a group of about 80 kids at a camp. It's all very, Bunyan and very on the nose. Yeah. And I'd ask questions at the end like, who do you think God was in this story? And they're shooting up their hands, and they're all just so excited to make the correlation. Like, oh yeah, the dragon is Satan.
It's like we forget that kids want to know what's right. They want to know the right answer, and they want to be able to show what they've learned. Such a nice guy. He's such a nice guy.
If you want to see more of that interview, it will be coming out on Friday, and you'll be able to see plenty more of Nate just going.
Do you put hearts in my eyes while he's speaking? It's time for the question we're all asking. What you been watching?
We should have a jingle for that.
We should. So, Eleanor, what you been watching?
I finished watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine at the weekend.
You finished Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
Yeah, 8 seasons. The final season came out just after the pandemic.
Okay.
They also were having to tackle Black Lives Matter and police brutality. And obviously, as a show about police detectives,
Yeah.
that's quite a difficult thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that final season was just coming into a world that didn't really want Brooklyn Nine-Nine anymore. And it just doesn't quite stick the landing because of that. It obviously needed to acknowledge those things that had happened. I think it would have been a mistake to just carry on business as usual without mentioning any of those things. But I think it's a little bit ham-fisted and heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And that final season becomes very serious in a way that the previous seasons were not.
Okay.
It tries to cash in on that emotional connection too much. It does it with several different topics, a few that aren't even pandemic or Black Lives Matter related.
Right.
And it just didn't quite stick the landing for me. However, I will say the last 2 episodes were very good.
Did you feel sad when it finished?
Not really. I think I was ready for it to end. I think that's actually something that I disagree on with James Carey, because he was saying in the interview you did with him that sitcoms aren't meant to end.
Well, they're very difficult to finish.
Yes. And I understand why they're difficult to finish and why often sitcom endings don't feel right. But at the same time, I'm a firm believer in every text should have an ending.
Okay.
I think if you go into something without an ending in mind, it just devolves into chaos. And I guess it's probably why I don't like watching things like soap operas.
It's an interesting point about soap operas, because I don't know what the viewing figures for those sorts of things are anymore. My guess is that they're not watched anywhere near as much as they used to be, and that soap operas don't really lend themselves to any kind of new media, social media type. But that idea that you're just going to have, particularly in the UK, EastEnders, Coronation Street, Emmerdale, they're just going to be on, and they're just going to carry on going. And whether anyone's trying to write new ones, or whether the age of the soap opera is completely dead. The other thing that could be happening, though, conversely, is that the age of the soap opera is really just beginning.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we talked about comfort in the sitcom thing, right? People are looking for comfort. And in the frenzied nature of the internet, people might want to retreat into an ongoing saga, which arguably is the big attraction of a lot of these massively multiplayer online games. It's just that the story is just carrying on and people can play it for hours and hours and hours. And maybe they just need soap operas, video games like The Sims or something. I don't actually know what The Sims is. But it's quite domestic.
Yeah.
Open world games as soap operas. There's a thesis.
So, Nate, what you been watching?
Well, Eleanor of Lothlorien, I, last night, in fact, watched a documentary about John Williams on Disney Plus with my son. He is a big fan of movie soundtracks. It's such a brilliant documentary. Not because it's a brilliant documentary, like, wow, okay, they're doing something incredible, but just because they keep showing you how much your life in media terms is dependent upon John Williams' genius. So you're like, okay, so he does Jaws, and then they get into all the stuff around Star Wars, and then it's stuff like Indiana Jones, and then it's stuff like E.T., and then it's stuff like, what's the other one? Jurassic Park. It's just ongoing. Just like, wow, he did Schindler's List. I mean, obviously he's working a lot with Steven Spielberg, and a lot of the documentaries about their relationship. But my goodness.
Isn't he Harry Potter as well?
He did Harry Potter as well, see? And then you just kind of going, yeah. And then Christopher Columbus is just like, oh yeah, he just came up with dun 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 dun. And when you got that bit, he was like, oh, that's got the dark and the light. And so you know it's magical because it's got this kind of mythic power. And I was like, wow. And Home Alone. Anyway, so you should watch that. Partly you'll just think, I'm just going to listen to John Williams soundtracks for my whole life. But again, just hammering home, and I do a lot about visual storytelling, the moving pictures and the sound is doing a lot of the emoting. I mean, I know some people might have other film composers that they prefer.
Phil Collins.
Who?
Phil Collins.
Phil Collins. Do you mean Tarzan? Oh, yeah. That was a guy who just cracked it. But the music that John Williams has produced and the impact that it has had on Western culture is huge.
Are you sure it's all John Williams? Were there any conspiracy theories that he's actually
He's multiple
people or...
toddlers dressed up in
Yeah.
a trench coat.
Yeah.
I don't know if they come into that.
Oh, doesn't sound like my kind of documentary then.
That would have been a fun one. Unmasking John Williams. So that's what I've been watching.
I think that's everything.
Please do remember that media consumption is optional. You are under no obligation to watch any of the things we've mentioned. That's more NPC analysis from an NPC dude. I'm Reformed Mythologist Nate Morgan Locke. We're glad you were here.